Hey, it's Chris. Welcome to a funny philosophy, I guess. I'll try and make it funny. Try and pump myself up with funny. Like this video if you like it, of course. I'm not going to force you to like the video and beg you like a pathetic animal. Nope, not me. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to talk about. I've obviously been doing this funny philosophy for ages. It's just something I do when I'm bored and I've got nothing else to do and I want to think about some problems and just riff on them. That's the whole series of this stuff going back to God, physics, religion, nihilism, existentialism, blah blah blah, blah going back I don't know, like 8 years by this point. Anyway, this is just going to be a general video talking about how I actually got an interest in philosophy. That's about it really. So my interest in philosophy really roots back to being a teenager. Um, Obviously, like a lot of teenagers, whenever you're finding out about something you don't know about, where'd you go? You go to the public library. So I went to my local library. I was very broadly interested in a lot of different subjects when I was younger. Everything from programming to art to philosophy, science, poetry even. But yeah, I approached probably as a lot of philosophers. I just sort of got like an, I don't know, like it was Dummy's Guide to Existentialism. I think was one of the first books I bought, and also like a general, introduction to Western and Eastern philosophy, which I got from the library. It was a big book. Basically, it just had a bunch of philosophers in it, and then in that book, I found out about Kant, of course, Immanuel Kant. That I didn't understand any of it at all. I obviously found out about the Greeks. Diogenes and obviously Plato, Socrates, um, Aristotle, and then of course I learned a bit about Eastern philosophers as well, so Confucius and the more Eastern like traditions of philosophy too, and Sun Tzu I think probably or Lao Tzu whatever I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read any of that, but anyway, so at first, I just read all that book. Thought it was quite interesting. I didn't really understand the, I didn't like really understand in depth many of the ideas, but I thought well, that's quite interesting. So my real starting point for proper investigating philosophy, obviously, if you're going to read philosophy, you have to read the source material. So a little further on from then, I think when I was in college, I started exploring a lot of Buddhism, a lot of counterculture philosophy, Timothy Leary, like psychedelic counterculture. I got read quite a lot into Buddhism, the Seven Noble Truths and I read quite fairly extensively about Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist, but I just found it an interesting series of ideas, basically. And it's the only real religion that I have at least a marginal interest in. I think all religions are essentially just. I think I don't believe in any religion. I think they're all based on a false premise. But Buddhism is more of a system of just acting in the world, which I quite like. This is the only reason I like Buddhism, really. I think probably with Buddhism, the only problem is that they are too pleasure denying, which I think is not a great thing. Anyway, I digress. The first real philosophy major work that read was Plato's The Republic, and I think I read some Sartre as well, so I dived into existentialism a bit. Was it Being in Nothingness? I read that in college. So like basically, I was doing a computer course, but in my spare time, like on breaks, I would read a lot of philosophy, just dive into existentialism mostly, and I think I started exploring Camus then, and sort of his ideas of absurdism, nihilism. I started exploring that. There's a website, it doesn't exist anymore, but it's like just a general introduction to the ideas of nihilism. So I explored that concept. From there, I would have been introduced to Nietzsche, I suppose, who's probably one of the most influential philosophers in terms of my own philosophical system, belief systems or whatever. And fast forward a bit, so that basically that my formative years I was spent exploring existentialism, Buddhism, religion, mythology, and obviously the Greeks. And then reading Plato, of course, which really is reading Socrates as well. Funny thing about Socrates is like pretty much like the reason he died is because he was just asking everybody like why all the time. It was pretty much literally the reason he died was because he was just like trolling people in the ancient Greece, like just saying, but why, but why, but why, but why. I mean, the Socratic method is basically just the infinite loop of just going, but why, but why, but why. I mean, so he's pretty much just killed for just annoying people by endlessly going, why though? Which, I mean, it's not funny for him, he's a long time dead, but, you know, sort of like, look at it like it's kind of funny. Just like, people got so annoyed with him, they're just like, fucking kill this guy already. Just asking too many questions. Why? Why? Anyway. So, yeah, then I went to university. I was going to study philosophy, so I got accepted at the local university. And then I also got accepted on a computer science course. And I opted to do the latter, down to the advice of my dad, which in hindsight was good advice because, you know, whilst the philosophy major or philosophy degree is useful, of course, like it's a good thing to know about, I don't think I'd be earning, like I don't earn loads of money now, like I'm pretty chaotic with work, but, you know, I can't even imagine how I'd manage with just a philosophy degree, unless I went into academia and became a professor or something. But, yeah, like I don't regret the decision per se, but, you know, I do in some respects regret it because I think I would have enjoyed the idea, whole thing of exploring ideas and being able to really dive into a lot of books. But, you know, ultimately, computer science is going to make you more money in the long run. Actually, while I was on my computer science course, we explored Bertrand Russell, who is a philosopher in his own right. So we actually did do a lot of, I think, like mathematics that's derived from his logical, you know, sort of like relational algebra, truth tables, Venn diagrams, essentially like logical propositions, exploring all that. So I actually did get introduced to an aspect of something that I've not explored even a great deal now, which is analytical philosophy, which is like there's like two schools. There's like continental. Well, they're not two schools, but like in modern contemporary, modern philosophy certainly. You've got like the continentals, which is broadly speaking like the European philosophers, like Nietzsche is a good example of a continental modern, Sartre, Camus. And then you have the analyticals, which is more of I think it's more centred around Britain actually. So you have Ludwig Wittgenstein, and that's more based around developing an analytical framework system for understanding the world and logic, and you know, like logical propositions, and being able to prove those propositions, blah blah blah. Whereas continental philosophy is just like is a sort of continuation of just why, asking why, not really looking for an explanation. In many respects, so you could view it like analytical philosophy is sort of like left-brained. It is looking for a structure in reality and a way to explain things. Continental philosophy is more like philosophy of the hammer, as Nietzsche would put it. It's just deconstruction. Postmodern, I think postmodernism probably comes under this banner as well. It's modernism and postmodernism, but we'll go to that too much here. But yeah, like essentially, a lot more continental philosophy is concerned with how to live your life, but also it's deconstructive in a lot of respects. And a lot of the time, it's more of a philosophy concerned with how to be an ethical, moral human being, or if those things don't matter. Some of the obviously like Nietzsche is a prime example, and Nietzsche was hugely influential on the existentialists. But one of Nietzsche's most challenging ideas is the fact that you have to create your own morality. There's no morality, there's ethical moral systems which are passed down through religious. But his whole thing was that religion is dead, religion is dying, as a belief system in the Western world, which has sort of come true. Less people believe in hierarchical, traditional religious systems. So his whole, well, Nietzsche had a lot of ideas, and obviously, you could talk about Nietzsche for a long time, but essentially the main challenge in Nietzsche was, so if there's no passed down, like, structured order, which is, God and or the religious hierarchy or the religious order, or there's no absolute morality, then how do you determine what is, how do you determine morality, basically? Anyway, we rambled a bit too much there. I've gone off track a bit. I've got a few books with me that I'll just talk individually about each one. I don't have my full collection here. A lot of my other books, especially the philosophy ones, are at my parents'. I'm not living with my parents, but I don't have my entire collection of books where I live. So this is just a few. I'm just going to talk about very briefly about each one. And I'll start probably in chronological order, like time order anyway. So I think that would mean that I would have to start with... these are like just basically important books in terms of philosophy for me. So Nietzsche. Like I said, Nietzsche is probably one of the most important philosophers in terms of my approach and my like appreciation of philosophy, basically. It's got the Birth of Tragedy. I've not actually read all this one. I've read, have I? No, I think I've read most of it. Essentially, it's just he's just talking about it's his first book, and he's basically talking about how the Greek form of tragedy, dramatic forms, how the Apollon, basically the main thrust of the book is the Apollo and Dionysus. Apollyon and Dionysian, which are two trends in Greek mythology. Dionysian is more chaotic and free. The Apollyon is more like logical. So it sort of relates to what I was saying before. I need to read this again. This isn't that important in terms of Nietzsche's work, but it is quite interesting. Actually, I should say the first Nietzsche work I ever read was The Antichrist, which I found a struggle, but I really enjoyed it. I read that online when I was in college, actually. I've read a bit of this, Why I'm So Clever. It's almost quite... this is one of his... this is before Ec Homo, which I've not actually read, but it's a bit silly. I don't really like it. Now, this, on the other hand, is not. Thus Spoke Zarathustra. This is also a knackered copy, but it's the second copy I think I have of this book, maybe even third. This is considered Nietzsche's most seminal work, basically, where he's put forth the idea of the Übermensch, the Superman, and basically where he talks about the cure, if you will, for nihilism and a way out of nihilism and basically become a self-created creative being. It's told through this character, this parable of Zarathustra. It's quite hard to read at times. It's very, it's almost like a religious text in some respects, but obviously it's not religious. It's about a prophet coming to the people and just basically always in a Christ-like way, which is quite ironic considering that Nietzsche was so anti-Christian. But one thing though with Nietzsche that's annoying there is he just basically just fucking hated women. That's annoying when you're reading him. He just not hated women. That's a bit harsh. He was certainly bitter. He asked Lou Salome to marry him. She said no. He took friend zoning way too hard and became bitter for the rest of his life, and then went insane. But shit happens. I've not actually read this for a while, but the Red Book by Carl Gustav Jung. Jung, I found a very interesting thinker. Himself also very influenced by Nietzsche. In fact, he's a German too, so I guess that makes sense. It'd be sort of reading the same volumes. He's obviously a psychologist. Was he Swiss actually or German? I can't remember. Anyway, but he's like Carl Jung, and he in this book. This is basically like a sort of. He had a nervous breakdown prior to the Second World War, And this is actually a recording of that. It's basically a series of dreams and visions. I've not read it for quite a while, but it's interesting. I mean, you've got to sort of view it as essentially, just like a man in a sort of semi-state of psychosis. There's a lot of interesting things you can get from it. So next, okay, so I've not read all of this yet, but Schopenhauer, The World as Will and Representation. Like I said, I've read this because I want to explore Schopenhauer's ideas more, and like sort of in general, like the philosophical pessimism. I've also been reading Philip Mainlander in this regard, Philosophy of Redemption, which is philosophy of redemption, sort of like an atheistic philosophy, but also it's quite, it's like drawing on Christian themes and everything. I think Nietzsche himself actually was quite critical of Mainlander somewhat, but Philip Mainlander's more of it's hard to get his books in English. Schopenhauer is the sort of, if you could say that like Kant is the sort of, I don't know, Immanuel Kant is the sort of like poster boy of like modern like metaphysics and that. Schopenhauer, in terms of pessimism, is probably the same poster boy for that sort of. But it's very deep. There's a lot of stuff in here. I've not really got that far with it. It was a long time. I just got a bit tired of reading it. But I'll probably give it another chance. And like Nietzsche was heavily inspired by Schopenhauer. I think Schopenhauer's main idea is that it's the driving force in life is will, which inspired Nietzsche with his like will to power idea. The blackest of black pessimists, Emile Caron. So I've read a few Caron's books. I do like him. He's a bit of a black humoured nihilist, really. The Trouble with Being Born. It's just like a nice, friendly title. But there's actually quite a lot. I found him quite funny. He also sort of explores like a lot of Buddhism in his writing. He's deeply anti-religious, quite a blasphemous. That's quite I enjoy it really. It's sort of just in a lot of ways I think Caron just calls a spade, but it is obviously it's jet black pessimism. It's not like let me just read like a passage from this then again. Nothing more aggravating than a seamless, unremitting irony which leaves you no time to breathe and still less to think, which instead of being inconspicuous, occasional, is massive, automatic, at the antipodes of its essentially delicate nature, which in any case is how it used to be in Germany, which nation which, having meditated upon it the most, is least capable of wielding it. That's not very good to quote, actually. This would be good. So this sort of maybe demonstrates it's sort of very blasphemous. In one of the chapels of the ideally ugly church, we find a virgin standing with her son above the globe. An aggressive sect which has undermined and conquered an empire and inherited its flaws, beginning with gigantism. I just find it all funny. Like, he's talking about Rome there, I think. But yeah, he's an enjoyable philosopher, I find. On to some more weird stuff. This is quite an important text in philosophy, and I've only flipped through this because it, Ludwig Wittgenstein, Tractatus Logica Philosophicus. Ooh, I don't know if I said that right. This is difficult. Let me just show you an example. Well, basically, it's all about language, essentially. Just show you. So you've got like, it's sort of linguistics and philosophy. I've not read it all, so I can't fully explain it. I didn't make those marks. I think I got the second hand. But essentially, this is like mathematics and philosophy mixed together, and it's very difficult to understand. I don't really get what it's on about still. But it's essentially saying that it's all about communication. It touches on linguistics as well. But yeah, it's just beyond me. I've not really fully explored it. Again, this is analytical philosophy. You know, just a lot of this sort of thing, and then tons and tons and tons, like just literally a bunch of claims. But then, like, he was a genius. Like Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein is considered one of the biggest geniuses. Like, you know, I mean, I can understand some of this mathematics somewhat, but again, like, it's something you need to really study really hard to, you know, really get any sort of meaning from it, I suppose. And like I said, it's sort of it's like empirical. It's like, it's a framework. I know what that is. It's a truth table. So essentially, that we learn about in computer science. But basically, this here is just essentially a truth table. So like proposition P, so proposition Q, but that's easy to understand. Anyone can understand that. It's like, if true, that's true. If false, true, then that's true. If true, false, then true. Blah 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 blah. So anyway, a long time since I did any of that, but we did actually do some of that mathematics at university. But it's been a while. But yeah, anyway. And then I'll just end the video here after this. This is the weirdest book I've ever read in my life. Deleuze and Guattari, Anti-Oedipus. Now, I was recommended by an artist friend, and like, I'll be honest, this is an example of sort of like postmodern philosophy. It talks about schizoanalysis. I'll be honest, when I started reading this book, I absolutely despised it. I hated it. But now I like it. It is one of the wackiest books I've ever read in philosophy. So I'll just... it's basically a major work in the development of critical theory in the late 20th century. Anti-Oedipus is an essential text for feminists, literary theorists, social scientists, philosophers, blah, blah, blah. Michel Foucault called it an introduction to non-fascist life, referring not just to political fascism, but to the fascism within us. So his primary idea expressed in this book is schizoanalysis, body without organs. You can already tell how weird it is. It's basically all about desire. Flows of it's like I've got, there's one bookmark just fell out. I've got another bookmark there. It's a ride. Like, it's a completely almost nonsensical ride, and you're going through it like, what are they going to say next? Like, it touches on like really controversial subjects. Let me just flip through there. You've got like, I mean, obviously it's Oedipus, so that it touches on incest, which it's not pleasant to read about. It's not a pleasant thing to read about. Freud, it's very critical of Freud. This is two philosophers, but they're very critical of Freud. Like, it talks about like schizophrenia, like how these people are sort of, you know, like are essentially victims of the society, and it's annoying to read at first, though. I don't know if it's the translation, so let me just give you an example of... I hated reading this at first, but I'm more used to this sort of language now. But when I first started reading this, I was extremely like, this is ridiculous. So, like, anyway, so this is chapter 2, the body without organs. Right? I just read an extract. An apparent conflict arises between desiring machines and the body without organs. Every coupling of machines, every production of a machine, every sound of a machine running becomes unbearable to the body without organs. Beneath its organs, it senses there are larvae and loathsome worms, and a god at work messing it all up or strangling it by organising it. The body is the body. It is all by itself, and has no need of organs. The body is never an organism. Organisms are the enemy of the body. Merely so many nails piercing the flesh, so many forms of torture. In order to resist organ machines, the body without organs presents its smooth, slippery, opaque, taut surface as a barrier. So, just reading this book, like, it's very difficult to understand, because it is almost like a schizophrenic word salad in some respects, and what Deleuze and Guattari were doing, I think, essentially is sort of using the idea of a schizophrenic. They were neither of them were schizophrenic, but using this sort of schizophrenic stream of consciousness in some respects to just deconstruct a ton of ideas relating to Marx, Freud, and etc., which is an interesting experiment. But again, this is a very frustrating book. I don't think I've ever read all of it. I've read most of it, but it's very much like to hold your attention truly for, I don't know, like 2 hours. It's fairly thick. It would be difficult because of the way it's written, because it feels so. And like I don't fully understand this book. I find it just still like, barbarian despotic machine. The Eurosat, I don't even know what that is. The civilized capitalist machine, the molecular unconscious. It's heavy shit. Like first positive task of schizoanalysis. Like it's heavy stuff. It's worth reading, but yeah, I mean, there's more philosophy books I've read, but like I said, I don't know. What I'm currently reading at the minute is Viktor Frankl's Search for Meaning, which I guess is sort of philosophy. It's basically Viktor Frankl was a survivor of the Holocaust, and it's just talking about how he sort of found meaning in the most harshest of situations. It's very good so far. I need to finish off. Anyway, that's probably enough. It's already been over 20 minutes actually. Bit of an introduction to how I got interested in philosophy, my background in philosophy, yada yada yada. Peace.